Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the legendary problem. The problem that's shown up for many generations in many Reddit forums, that there are way too many legendaries. It's worse now more than ever because of the Paradox Pokemon and Okidoki, Monkidori, Pheasantipity, DLC stuff. So, I'm going to be choosing which Pokemon should stay and which should just be powerful Pokemon. Unlike many other YouTubers, I have a few different categories that I'm going to be using. They have to have lots of lore, which means they need stories, myths, legends about them, because, you know, they're legendary Pokemon. They have to be over 100 years old. That's just, they can't have legends and myths made, like, 3 seconds before that they are considered legendary. That doesn't make sense. There can only be one per save file, which makes sense. There can only be one legendary, you know? If they show up in another game, as long as it's, like, actually another game, then you're fine. That doesn't matter. And the last category, they cannot be man-made, because man-made Pokemon are not legendaries. They're just really strong Pokemon that we messed with. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. First, the Cantonian birds. And I'm going to link the Galarian birds also in this category, just because it's easier and I don't want to go over them later. They are not legendary, either of the bird sets. It's wildly preposterous that they are. The Cantonian birds have almost no lore. They follow Lugia around and kind of control the weather, like, not a lot though. From what we can tell, they're old enough, over 100 years old. I'm not 100% sure, they don't really talk about it. But there is not only one in a save file. The Cantonian birds, you can find multiple in Let's Go. As for the Galarian birds, they don't have any lore. They stand by a tree. You can only find one though, so they're fine in that category, but not anywhere else. Mewtwo, as I'm sure many of you are confused by, not a legendary. Made by humans, probably not old enough, and man-made, like, that's it. It has lore, yeah, but still. Mew! Mew is legendary in my opinion, for the sole reason of it has a lot of lore, being the first genetic Pokemon and all that stuff. It is definitely old enough, it's been there since the dawn of time. You can only get one per save file, and it's not man-made, that we know of. So, Mew's a legendary, or I guess technically a mythical, which we're counting because it's a subset of legendary, same with Ultra Beast and Paradox Pokemon. Okay, moving on to Gen 2. Gen 2, we have the 3 legendary beasts, but are they still legendary? Yes, yes they are. They have sufficient lore of burning in the tower. They are pretty old, older than I believe it's 250 years old, so definitely. There is usually only one in per save file, especially in Heart Gold and Silver. Soul Silver. I'm like losing my mind. And they are not man-made, so they're legendary. Very funny. Lugia and Ho-Oh are both also legendary. They have lots of lore surrounding the towers and controlling the legendary birds. And there's only one per save file. Not man-made. Yeah, you get it. Celebi. From what we can tell, which, like, it's kind of hard since it's a time-traveling little onion, but it does have a sufficient amount of lore of showing up time travel-y with a wormhole thingy-mabobs, and it seems old enough. Since it's a time traveler, it's kind of hard to tell. It's also kind of hard to tell if it's man-made, but it's an onion, so I'm assuming it's not. It's linked with nature, so that's also more lore, in case anyone was wondering. And you can only get one per save file, meaning that, again, it's still legendary, mythical, whatever you want to call it. Next up, we have Regirock, Regice, and Registeel. These 3 are not legendary. You find multiple in save files. Multiple trainers have them, including Brandon. They are old enough. Again, there's not only one. And the lore's kind of... I know that it's probably enough lore, but, like... And I don't know if Regigigas counts as a man, but if he does, then they're also man-made. Alright, I don't think that we're going to count that one, though. Latias and Latios, the Eon duo. These two are definitely not legendary. They are just jet planes who have below average speed stats, which makes no sense whatsoever. They have 0 lore. They are old enough, and there's only one of them. But they have no lore, like, at all. And they might be man-made, because they are just jet planes. But they go into dreams, so who knows. Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza. These 3 are still legendary. They're definitely old enough. They have a solid amount of lore with the battles of Kyogre and Groudon and Rayquaza calming them with a steel chair. No, I'm kidding. And they're definitely not man-made. They were around way before that. So, there goes Hoenn. That was quick, right? I'm just kidding. We still have Jirachi and Deoxys. I entirely forgot that there were mythicals in this region. Jirachi is legendary, in my opinion. You only get 1 per save file, not man-made. It's definitely old enough. It sleeps for many years. And it does have a solid amount of lore of just, it sleeps for a while and then grants wishes. Deoxys, however, one of my favorite Pokemon, is not. A, it doesn't have a lot of lore. B, it's not really that old. Well, we don't really know how actually old it is, but it's not old enough for us to consider it legendary, seeing as you find the spaceship, it's there. There is technically not only one. It gets kind of hard when there are forms, but considering that it's the same Pokemon changing form, I'm going to say there is only one, so that's probably fine. And we have no idea if it's man-made, so I'm just going to say this is kind of a gray area where it's like, it's not legendary. We'll call it a subset of strong Pokemon, just like aliens, which I think they should just make that a thing, because Ultra Beasts are stupid. Gen 4, aka Sinnoh. We have Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. They have a lot of lore. They're definitely old enough. Oh, their lore, by the way, is just, they gave people and animals thoughts and emotions. And there's only 1 per save file, so there's that too. So they are definitely legendary. Next up, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, the creation trio. These 3, I think, are legendary. They have a solid amount of lore. They are definitely old enough. Been around since the dawn of time. Only 1 per save file, and they're definitely not man-made. So there's that too. Heatran is not legendary though. It has no lore. It's probably old enough. There's only 1, but no lore. So it's just a little beast that's in a volcano. That's kind of it. Meanwhile, Cresselia is legendary. I believe that it's like battle with Darkrai of dreams and nightmares. I'm going to link Darkrai with Cresselia. They're both legendary. They're definitely old enough. Only 1 per save file. And they have somewhat sufficient lore. So I'm just going to count them. They make sense in a general standpoint. Also, has anyone else noticed that, like, the Eon Duo, Jirachi, Cresselia, and Darkrai all interfere with dreams? I don't know. That's just something I thought I wanted to bring up. I don't know if I actually wanted to bring it up. Anyway, we have Phione and Manaphy. These are considered mythical Pokemon, and I don't think they should. For Phione, there are multiple Phione. You fight them in Legends Arceus. I have like 6. Manaphy, I would consider a legendary. It's got a solid amount of lore of being the Prince of the Sea or whatever. It's definitely old enough, and there is only 1 of it. But Phione, no. A lot of people would never consider that a stinking mythical. No one should consider it. Anyway, Shaymin. It has some amount of lore. It purifies air. It's probably old enough from what we can tell. You only get 1 per save file. But there are definitely a lot more of them, in case anyone watched the Giratina movie. So, I am going to not count this as a legendary because you can find multiple in the movies. Because yes, while you get 1 per save file, which, that makes sense, the movies, they got sufficient, like, lore when it comes to that kind of stuff. And there being multiple of it doesn't really work out, so I'm just not going to count it. Move on. Arceus is definitely a legendary. It's old enough, heck of a lot of lore, you know, creating the universe and all that, being the egg or whatever. And there's only one of them, so, yeah. Moving on. We now have the Protection Trio, or whatever they're called. Terrakion, Cobalion, Virizion, whatever, and Keldeo. These are legendary, in my opinion. Other than Keldeo. Keldeo is not. They have a lot of lore of protecting animals and saving people in the forest. They have one per save file. But Keldeo is not old enough. He is young when we find him in the movie, and again, I'm going to be using the movies as stuff because I watched those when I was younger. So, sorry comments. And, yeah, that's the reason Keldeo is not legendary, but the other three are. Sorry, I got a little cold. Next up we have Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus. I think that they are legendary. They have a good amount of lore of keeping nature in balance, I guess. Probably. They're definitely old enough, and there is one per save file. And we're not counting the Therian form, since I already said it's technically the same Pokemon, but, like, just different forms. Moving on, we have Meloetta. Meloetta is not legendary. I don't care about whatever lore happened in that weird Pokemon thing, or the one Pokemon show movie thing with Giovanni, or whatever was happening with the Landorus trio. No, it's not legendary. It's got no lore. There's only one per save file. It's old, but I don't think it has enough lore to become considered legendary. It's just a Pokemon that sings. That's just about it. So, yeah, that's kind of sad. Now for the original Dragon Trio. These three are legendary. They have a ton of lore of being the original dragon, you know. They're definitely old enough. And there's only one per save file, so yeah, they're definitely legendary. However, Genesect is not. He has some lore, which, honestly, if it weren't for the other thing, he would be considered legendary, but he isn't. He's very old, and there's only one per save file. So what gives, Noah? What's the problem? He's very man-made! Team Plasma brings him back to life and gives him a stinking gun on his back! Like, what? They turn a regular Kabutops into stinking a tank! A flying tank, if anyone watched those movies. Like, come on! Victini, on the other hand, is legendary. It's got a good amount of lore of, you know, making Pokemon win. Maybe that's not a lot of lore. I'm rethinking my answer. It's not legendary. It has no lore, that's the only reason. That's pretty much it. Next, we're moving on to Gen 6, aka X and Y. We have Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde to start off with. I think all of them are legendary. They have a solid bit of lore of death and life, and then the balance between them. They're old enough, as we saw the Ancient Time thing. There's only one per save file, except with Zygarde. Zygarde, I'm not considering a legendary, because there are hundreds of thousands of millions of these cells that you can find. And while some of you might be like, oh, well, the cells add up to a bigger being. No. I'm not considering it for Zygarde. No. Under no circumstances. There are too many, and there are, like, different conscious forms walking around. Just because they form into a Power Ranger or Voltron does not mean that they are legendary. So let's go to the mythicals of this region. Diancie, Hoopa, and Volcanion. I'm also going to be counting Magearna in this category because for some reason everyone thinks that it's the next gen, including Pokemon themselves. It's not! I'm not no. No. That's my reasoning, no. Anyway, Diancie is legendary. It has a lot of lore of, well, being a diamond and holding up its whole clan's reputation. It's pretty old because, you know, it's a diamond. And there's only one per save file. So, yeah. That seems like a solid legendary, mythical, whatever. Volcanion is not a legendary. I could not find a lot of lore on this Pokemon. There is only one and it's old, but not enough lore for it to really be considered a legendary. Meanwhile, Hoopa is a legendary. it's got tons of lore with destroying towns and cities and stuff, and it had to be contained and all that stuff. There's only one per save file. Again, we're not counting forms. And it's really old. We saw it destroy a village in that movie that I vaguely remember. That was a fine movie. Gen 7 legendaries. Here is where we're going to start to get a little crazy, since we're counting the... We're going to go through the Ultra Beasts also, which that's going to stink. So we're going to start off with Type Null and Sylvali. Sylvie. Neither of them are legendary. They're both man-made. That's it. There's nothing else that I need to go over. They're also, I don't think, old enough, so there's that too. The Tapus, however, are legendary. They have tons of lore surrounding them, protecting the islands, and they're very old. There's only one per save file. Cosmog, Cosmoem, Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma. That is a lot. So we're going to break it down into Cosmog, Cosmoem, Solgaleo, and Lunala. Just this entire line. They are not legendaries. They are part of the new alien category that we made for Deoxys. That is probably where we're going to put all the Ultra Beasts. They're just coming from another, like, dimension to put more Cosmogs in. And we've seen that there are multiple of them throughout time, like in the lore of the story. So they have sufficient lore. They're old enough, but there is not only one. Necrozma, on the other hand, is also not legendary. It has not a lot of lore, but we're going to count it as the lore category. It's definitely old, but is there only one? Yes. So why am I considering it not legendary? Because just like the other ones, it came from outer space, and while I'm not counting Jirachi as a alien Pokemon, Necrozma's hunting down the Lunala line. So I'm just not going to count it as legendary. Assume that it's with those, and that there are probably multiple of them that are hunting them down. I'm making a few assumptions when it comes to this one, so feel free to alter my charts a little bit when it comes to these. So, we're on to Ultra Beasts, aren't we? This'll be nice. I didn't go over Magearna, by the way. I'm just gonna go over it now. Ultra Beasts. None of them are legendary. Not a single one of them are legendary. You can find tons of them in certain save files, or in any save files for that matter. And that's just stupid. And as for Naganadel, they talk about how there are multiple of them and tons of Poipole and stuff, so that's sad. Meanwhile, Magearna is also not legendary. It's man-made. That's just how it was. But Marshadow, Zeraora, Meltan, and Melmetal were all in this region. Meltan and Melmetal are not legendary because there are tons of Meltan. That's about it. Melmetal is the evolution of Meltan, so I'm assuming that, considering there are many of them, there are probably a ton of Melmetals also, you know? Meanwhile, Zeraora, while we don't actually know his exact age, it's not an old Pokemon. So I'm going to say that this is not legendary. It's just a really strong and really cool Pokemon. Marshadow, on the other hand, is not legendary either. Yeah, I pulled a sneaky one on you. There are multiple Marshadow. Not in a save file, but again, we're hinting to the movies and all the other stuff that's coming around. We're not using the show, but the movies has sufficient lore on the legendaries, so we're counting it. So, yeah, we're on to Gen 8 already. Isn't that crazy? I find it crazy. So, yeah. First, we're going to start off with whatever these three are called. Zacian, Zamazenta, and Eternatus. Those pictures probably sucked, but like, yeah. These three, I believe, are legendary. Except for Eternatus. Eternatus will, again, fall into the category of alien, which I have created for this video. The reason that this is because Zacian, Zamazenta, they've got a solid amount of lore of defeating Eternatus, protecting Galar. They're hecka old, and there's only one per save file. They're not man-made either. Eternatus, on the other hand, has some lore of just being defeated, and is pretty old. We don't know if there's only one. But again, it's just an alien that kind of came to the planet and just existed. So I don't think we can really count it as legendary, you know? Not with me feeling like that. Just probably linked to the Ultra Beast somehow, I'm sure. Like Necrozma or something. But anyway, we can move on to the really stupid DLC Pokemon. Took over VGC for a while. Kubfu, Urshifu. These are not legendary. Many people in the game have them when you have the DLC, so we're just gonna skip past that and move on. Regieleki and Regidrago, unlike the other Regis, are legendary. They have the same lore, which is enough. They are pretty old, and there's only one. So that's it. Unless we're counting Regigigas as making them man-made. Which, it just occurred to me, I forgot to mention Regigigas. Regigigas is definitely a legendary. Just putting that out there. He's got tons of lore of creating them, very old, and he's only one. Moving on. We have Glastrier, Spectrier, and Calyrex. These are legendary, in my opinion, but only when they're mixed together as one Pokemon, as we see right here. What this means is the horses by themselves and Calyrex by himself are not legendary, because of the lore aspect. Because lore, or not the lore aspect, because of the, only one aspect, sorry. As one. The ability. But no, sorry. They have lots of lore, they're old, there's only one per save file. Moving on. We have Enamorus. No, it's not legendary. There's no lore about it. Like, at all. They don't mention any lore about it in Legends Arceus, so no, it's not legendary. For any of you who are wondering. Alright, so the mythical Pokemon from Gen 8 was Zarude! And while I don't know much about this Pokemon, I will say that it is not legendary. There are multiple Zarudes that you can find, including Dada Zarude, with like the weird thing around his neck, and then a regular Zarude, which means he can't be legendary. So here we are, Gen 9, the final generation at the time of recording this. So let's go over them. Paradox Pokemon. None of them are legendary. You can find so many in the save files. Same with Koraidon and Miraidon. You can find 2 of them total. One that you're riding on, the other one that you actually catch. So, what about the Ruins of Treasure, or Treasure of Ruin, or whatever? They have lore, each for a certain one, like killing people and doing bad things, mainly. They're very old, and there's only one per save file. So, yes, they are legendary. Moving on to the final point of this video, the DLC. This means the Teal Mask, since the Indigo Disc is not out at the time of recording this. So for the Teal Mask, Ogerpon is legendary. There's only one, it's solidly old, and it has a great amount of lore of killing those horrible people. So yeah, I'm not horrible people, but you know what I mean. The poisony dudes, the loyal 3. Speaking of them, they are also legendary. They have a lot of lore with all that. They're old, and there's only one of each of them. So, that's all for this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.